Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahabashai, Bahasham, Rakahakwadash, Barakathum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahabashai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in 2nd Esdras chapter 9 in the Apocrypha, verse 1. He answered me then and said, Measure thou the time diligently in itself, which is exactly what the true men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, are doing by reading the scriptures and watching the news, and then filtering the news through the scriptures to go out onto the highways and byways to preach this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this to tell the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, the 144,000 and the rest of the righteous 1/3 of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, of the times to come and what you need to do to stay in the good graces of your power, Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, so you can be saved from them, and to also tell 2/3 of the nation of Israel who are hard-headed and refuse to return under their power, as well as you heathen nations, of the times of Jacob's trouble as well, and all the judgment and punishment and calamities that are coming your way for all the wickedness you've been committing. And when thou seest part of the signs past, which I have told thee before, then shalt thou understand that it is the very same time wherein the highest will begin to visit the world which he made, visit this world and judge you people for all the wickedness you've been committing. Verse 3, speaking of some of the end times prophecies to know that we're living in the last seconds of the last days before the second coming of Yahushua Hamashiach, whom the world ignorantly refers to as so-called Jesus Christ, the end of the rulership of these heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, or the so-called white people, and the ushering in of the eternal kingdom of heaven, ruled by the children of Israel. Therefore, when there shall be seen earthquakes, which are happening damn near daily all across the planet, and uproars of the people in the world, then shalt thou well understand that the Most High spake of those things from the days that were before thee, even from the beginning. For like as all that is made in the world hath a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest. And if you've got that spiritual eye salve, you can clearly see the end is manifesting right before us. And some of the things to let us know that is, again, back in verse 3, earthquakes and the uproars of the people in the world, which is what I'll be dealing with in this video. This is an article from BylineTimes.com titled, Global Banks Privately Prepare for Dangerous Levels of Imminent Civil Unrest, Uproars of the People in Western Homelands. And as we'll see in this article, these uproars of the people, which are already taking place, are only going to intensify as we get closer and closer to the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations. And you can see that a lot of different flashpoints are brewing up that's going to lead to civil unrest, not just in the Western homelands, but all across the planet. Food shortages, fuel shortages, etc., etc. Global banks and investment firms are bracing themselves for an unprecedented upsurge in civil unrest, uproars of the people in the US, UK, and Europe, as energy and food prices spikes are set to drive costs of living to astronomical levels, Byline Times can exclusively reveal. And a lot of these different instances, such as rising energy and food prices taking place, are all being orchestrated by the elites, such as the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, DuPonts, Gettys, Massimos, Merovingians, you name it, to get you people in an uproar and to riot out here so they can be justified in bringing in a state of martial law and further implementing their NW0, the GREAT, the fourth industrial revolution. But on top of that, it's ultimately through the will of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai to fulfill prophecy and judgment. The information comes from the head of a financial institutions group, which provides expertise and advisory services to other banks, insurance companies, and other financial institutions at one of the largest investment firms in the U.S. The senior investment executive who spoke to Byline Times on conditions of anonymity because the information he revealed is considered highly sensitive, said the contingency planners at top financial institutions believe dangerous levels of social breakdown in the West are now all but inevitable and imminent. An outbreak of civil unrest is expected to occur anytime this year. For all things have a beginning and an end, and the end is manifest, but most likely in the coming months as the impact of the cost of the living crisis begins to saturate the lives of everyone. And also, what are they talking about? Rolling blackouts due to high energy usage this summer. The executive works at a leading Wall Street firm, which is considered a systemically important financial institution by the U.S. Financial Stability Board. These are institutions whose functioning is considered critical to the U.S. economy and whose failure could trigger a financial crisis. According to the executive, major banks all over the world, including in the U.S., UK, and Western Europe, are instructing their top managers to begin actively planning how they will respond to the impact of financial disruption triggered by a prolonged episode of civil unrest. However, the banking official did not elaborate on what these planning measures involved beyond reference to stress testing to determine the impact on investment portfolios. And another thing that these elites want to bring about through these manufactured crises to get these people in an uproar is a reset of the global financial system to turn it into a digital-based financial system with CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and the middleman between the people and these central banks and the digital currencies is going to be the charagma, the mark of the BEAST in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, which you should know by now is the RFID/NFC, MICROCHIPIMPLANT. While increased civil unrest in developing countries has been openly discussed by major institutions such as the UN, World Bank, and the IMF, and other institutions, this is the first time in recent years that expectations of a coming epidemic of social breakdown in Western societies has been attributed to top banking and investment firms. All the major banks know that the cost of living crisis is out of control, said the top financial advisor. The situation was bad enough and highlighted how certain groups of people were going to be worse affected: the poor, minorities, and so on. Speaking of you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. But the combination of energy and food shocks are a tipping point that will push Western societies over the edge. This will impact everyone. Well-to-do middle classes will find it hard to afford staple foods and pay bills, so we are anticipating dangerous levels of civil unrest that could spiral into an unprecedented social crisis. That's exactly what's going to happen. People are going to take to the streets and fight each other and also fight those in the government. This is 2 Esdras chapter 15. I'm going to start at verse 14. Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and the modern day sword, especially in the United States of America, is the gun. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, one race of people, one political group of people against another political group of people, the average Joe against the government, etc., etc. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. Uproars of the people, for there shall be sedition among men. And when you look at the definition for that word sedition, it means conduct or speech inciting rebellion against a ruling authority or monarch, civil unrest, civil war. When the majority of these people finally wake up to the fact that those in the government never had their best interests at heart and have actually been working against them to fulfill the dictates of the elites, these people are going to go buck wild out here and look for blood. Look for the blood of you politicians and other people in the government, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and your modern day kings and princes are these people in the government. Mayors, governors, senators, presidents, prime ministers, as well as the authorities that uphold the system, such as the police or the military, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. The warning comes as Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey described how the apocalyptic food and energy price rises and a 30-year high rate of inflation would lead to a very big income shock, driving up unemployment and slashing household spending. But that barely scratches the surface. The senior U.S. banking official warned Byline Times that the current crisis was about to plunge the general public, including middle classes, into deepening poverty. Worse, the conventional economic toolbox to address financial volatility had run out of steam. There isn't anything left in the toolbox of the existing financial system. We've run out of options. I can only see the situation worsening. The official claimed that they had been made aware of the internal planning by various banks through conversations with senior colleagues in recent weeks. The official's warnings fit into an analysis I'd put together in 2017, where I had argued that a combination of energy, food, and debt crises similar to what we had seen in the run-up to the 2008 financial crash were likely to reappear in the coming years in a more intense form. The global system, I'd warned, was in the midst of a protracted collapse process as the incumbent fossil fuel dominant paradigm crumbles into a spiral of diminishing returns. Although I'd expected this global crisis convergence to happen earlier, it was delayed by the impact of the situation dealing with the Cragamuffin 19, which temporarily reduced demand and global consumption. A major outbreak of civil unrest this year would be consistent with a rising trend in political violence over the last decade since the 2008 financial crash, as documented by the Institute for Economics and Peace's Global Index. Between 2011 and 2019, demonstrations, strikes, and riots around the world increased by 244% and continued to increase in 2020 during the situation. So the uproars of the people were already in effect, and they're only going to get worse from here on out. The Global Peace Index's latest figures show that global peace has deteriorated for the 9th time in a row by 0.7% and has overall worsened over the last 15 years, because these are the times we're living in. As pursuant to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there's a time and a season for everything. There's a time for love, but there's a time for hate. There's a time for peace, but there's a time for war. And those are the times we're living in. Peace, hate, war, violence, death, destruction, judgment, punishment, you name it. Violent demonstrations and riots have now occurred in 158 countries, over 80% of the world, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and there shall be sedition among men. This escalating trend in civil unrest fits into a pattern of systemic social unrest, with multiple countries simultaneously expressing dissatisfaction, anger, and demanding change from who? Their governments. And they shall not regard their kings or princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power. So that's it with this article. But as we can clearly see, biblical prophecy continues to take place right before our very eyes. Apostle Tahar has deemed 2022 to be the year of Yahweh Bahashem Yahawashi turning things up, and things are turning up exponentially. But now I'm going to close it out in Luke chapter 21, verses 25 to 26. And this is Yahawashi Hamashiach telling his disciples of the end time signs to look for, to know that his second coming was nigh, the end of the rulership of the heathen nations was at hand, and the kingdom of heaven is at the door. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon. And just the other day, there was a lunar eclipse that led to a blood moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth, distress of nations, uproars of the people, civil unrest, race wars, civil wars, people demanding change from their governments, people rioting and in distress over food shortages, fuel shortages, blackouts, you name it, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts or minds failing them for fear, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, all these judgments and punishments from Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, famines, pestilences, again, uproars of the people in the world, race war, civil war, world wars, nuclear war. For the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong, as we can clearly see we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Mabol, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.